All right, so I just kicked my shape layers over from Illustrator to After Effects, and let's go and pre-comp this. Call this Chaos PC. Move all attributes, and you don't have to, we're only doing one frame here, but adjust duration. That's just going to keep the length of my layers in there. And let's go and get our first texture in here. So I think that is the one that I have loaded up here. You can use any texture you like. It is. And here it is. This is the one that I have. I believe this is from, it's either one of my personal textures that I photographed, like a kitchen tray or something, metal, and turned it into black and white. Or you can search online and find grunge textures and go that route, whatever suits your needs. But black and white is what we're going to be designing here. And also this is going to be used as a Luma matte. So black and white works a little bit better with that. So let's drop it above and do a Luma inverted matte on our Chaos layer. So now you can see that Chaos, not sure why the transparency is going away when I do that, but Chaos is there and it has the texture inside of it. The next thing that I want to do is start messing around with some of this. Let's get this curves. I'll try and use my effects and presets panel. So curves here, and let's set this up. I'm not sure why that's doing that. That's kind of weird, but I want to pull this down, pull the middle up, and then pull the back down. And it's just creating a little bit more beef in the mid-tone area. And that works for me. So we're making the highlights brighter, but also pulling them down here a little bit. Brighter because this point is in. I'm making the black tones a little bit more on the gray side by pulling this up. And then also making the dark grays darker by pulling this down. And then making all of the mid-tones a little bit lighter by pushing this up here. And that is the tone that we are going to do for that texture to start. Let's go to create a solid and call this fractal 01. 4K size is fine, any color, because we are going to be loading in. Let's drop it underneath our Chaos, and actually let's solo this and let's do fractal noise. Fractal noise. So I'm going to be going to Smeary, soft linear, contrast of 605, a brightness of 26, a scale of 2000. Look at that, perfect. And then a complexity of 10. Nice. So getting a lot more detail in here. And as I said before, we're going to be using 3 fractals, and sometimes that can chew up a ton of your RAM in your computer. So the other thing, I had this set to a random seed of 3, but you can see if the patches, the white patches here, don't land in an area that you want, you can change this and they will kind of shift around and change up your design. So I had figured out earlier that 3 was the one that I wanted. So let's go. Let me drop a new solid in here too. Maybe this not being solid back there. Yeah, I'm not sure why that's doing that. That's really weird. But oh well. Well, maybe actually let's drop our texture back there. Maybe I can do it that way. So this is my second texture. And what I want to do here is just invert this texture and then do a curves and pull the black points in. Yeah, I don't get why. That is not showing up. It's there, but it's not. Do this. Huh. I know why. Duh. Black. We need this to be white. There we go. Luma inverted. There we go. And should that be? I think that actually should be Luma, regular Luma, not Luma inverted. All right. So now we're back to square one here. So fractal 01 is loaded up, and let's do a camera lens blur. Let's type in the right spot. Camera lens blur. I'm going to change this to 60. And this is where we're going to load up our fractal noise. I don't have this pre-comped, so when you don't have something like that pre-comped, go to effects and mask, and it will load in whatever effect and or mask is on that layer. And as I said, it does chew up a lot of RAM sometimes. So let's set this to octagon, which is going to be a little bit better of a blur, but that works for me. And now let's add a Gaussian blur to our typography and set this to 15. And what this is doing is it's going to, if I pull this off, see you're getting these straight edges here and these really hard edges around the C. Set this to 15. It's going to soften everything up a little bit. Now, what I like to do is build this stuff so that everything's editable, and maybe 15 is too much when I look at it down the road. So the fact that I'm not burning anything into this, it can all be changed later, really kind of helps. So let's leave it like that for right now at 10. And then let's load up a second fractal map. So I want to call this fractal 02. Let's reset it. And what I want to do is do dynamic. Let's check out this look. So fractal type is dynamic. Noise type is soft linear. Contrast of 407. The brightness is down to a -40. So I'm tightening up the whites here. Complexity of 5. And then a 250 scale. So making things bigger. And then here, I want to mask out. If I turn this off, I want to mask out the center of this chaos word. And then throw a Gaussian blur over top of this. Let's bring this back. So instead of trying to blur this with the complexity, like you could pull this down to 3 and get some pretty blurry. I like where this is at 5. You're seeing some of this, you know, the shapes and stuff in here, but I want to expand this and set this to 30. And what's nice too is when you do that, it's actually going to blur these edges too. So instead of trying to mess with complexity and then your mask feather, I just threw a Gaussian blur over top of everything. And you can turn that layer off. Let's go back to our chaos typography. And let's load up a displacement. I'm sorry, I keep using this shortcut there. And I'm going to use a displacement map. And set my layer to fractal 02. Same thing. Because it's not pre-comped, set it to effects and masks. And then I want to set this to 15 and 20. And you're going to see that what that does is it kind of, look at this C here, it kind of makes everything wavy and distorted. And you can see it in the A shape here. If I turn this on right now and off. You can see that jump. And it's just going to make things a little bit more of that organic feel, that maybe water dripped onto this, or, you know, whatever it may be. That's how we get that effect. All right, so the next thing we have to add is a glow to the typography. Now, I did build this with Sapphire plugins, so I want to showcase that, and then also how we can get that in After Effects, just using After Effects stuff. So my brightness, if you have Sapphire, my brightness is set to 1, my threshold to 0.2, and then my glow width to 6. And what this is acting as is just like a little fill layer, but it's a glow, so it's not just plastering white over top. It's going to look at this layer and just thickens it up a little bit without losing the texture inside, and without losing, see how this A right here, watch this edge right here. If I turn this off, see how it kind of, there's a fall off here, and it just, I don't know, it doesn't look as good. I turn this glow on, see how things get thicker and the fall off is much shorter. So that's what I use the glow for. And to create the same effect from the After Effects glow, let's go down here and let's do a threshold of 70. It's almost perfect the way it is, but I want to do a glow intensity of maybe like a 0.6, and then a glow radius of 15. Yeah. So it's a little bit thicker on the After Effects one. And it doesn't seem that my threshold. No, let's keep color channels. Maybe radius back down to 10. 12. And a glow intensity of 0.4. Pretty darn close. So we will leave that and take the Sapphire out. The next thing I want to do is load my background. Nope, I loaded my background image already. I want to add some adjustment layers. So the first one here is a tint, and that's going to turn everything black and white. And what I'm going to do now is just kind of mold the whole frame together. So I have my main elements in here. I have my background texture. I have all this stuff kind of working in its own way and shape and form. And now what I want to do is go and say, okay, let's make this look like it's one piece of artwork. And we're going to blend everything together. So the first thing, let's make it black and white. That's the easiest thing. It ends up being black and white, but whenever you composite, black and white is your friend. Next thing I want to do, and I'm holding down Option Command Y, Option Control Y to add a new adjustment layer. Let's add another glow, but this is an overall glow. And I did use Sapphire Glow again. So same thing as before, a brightness of 1, a threshold of 0.2, but this time we're going to go up to a 120. And I can actually bring this tint up so we keep this black and white. And you can see what this does is it just kicks a glow out off the edges here. And to do the same thing with After Effects, one more time just to show you. See how After Effects, this is a really, really tight glow and it just doesn't look very pretty. Let's pull this down and maybe go to like a 0.4. Let's take the glow radius up to a 140 and a threshold of something like that. And then I could duplicate that, take my radius way up, my intensity down, and my threshold up maybe. And I'm trying not to kick too much into, I want the outside glow to kind of work. So I think that looks pretty good. Let's check it with my original one. There's my original one, which it's definitely softer, but this will work too. And maybe let's go to 200 and let's go to 150. Yeah, that could work. We'll make it work, right? All right. Next layer is to add some grain in here. I want to set this to overlay. Now I want to add grain. And again, I did use Sapphire plugins, but I will show you what the grain could be as well. So this was a 0.2 for the amplitude and the frequency of 800. And now you can see this grain come in. And this is a key to the whole look, I think, is this grain. So it's overlaid over the entire image, but you see when the overlay blending mode comes in, it's now taking that soft blur that I had and the glow and throwing in this little grain texture. And I think that's so key to get this blending between the background and the typography and everything to look like it's one piece of artwork. And you can see here, it looks like this H is being shredded apart, and the grain's really helping that. When you turn that off, it definitely looks like two pieces. There's typography in here and there's a background. You turn that grain on, set it to overlay, it looks like it's one piece. So to try and get that to look the same with After Effects, let's go to add grain and let's preview final output. And let's try something, see if a preset will do it for me. I want 800T is a pretty fast film, so that should be a lot of grain. And color, let's monochromatic this. Intensity, maybe do a 1.4. Okay, we're getting there. I'm looking down here, and I'm also looking at this right here as how this is blending. My softness, I want this to be a 0.75. And my size, I think I want to go up in size and maybe try it too. Close. 1.6 maybe. That looks good. And intensity, let's take this to 1.8. Maybe higher, 2.4. And size down to 1.2. You can mess with these numbers. That looks pretty good. So you can see the grain effect though in there. It really kind of helps sell this effect of being a grunge typography. It's not as, I couldn't get as similar. That's pretty darn close though. So that's how you get the same look as the Sapphire grain that I had. And then there's one more adjustment layer. Let's click here, rename this to blur. Same thing. I used an S blur, which is a Sapphire blur. And the blur amount was set to 4. And the offset darks was set to 8.1. I want to show you why I use Sapphire blur, and again, how we can get the same look. So Sapphire blur has this little offset dark option here. And what that is going to do is to take your dark tones and bump them up a little bit into the grays. So if I set this to a 0.1, see how now there's nothing that's black in here, it's gray. This really is the final key to the look. It just helps sell this grunge effect. So how we can do that with just After Effects, go to a Gaussian blur, Load this in, go to maybe an 8. Repeat edge pixels on this one because we are setting this to the entire edge. And maybe let's go to a 10. And then let's load up a curves as well. And drop this in here and pull this up a little bit like that. And then drop this down and then set this back on its line. And that should get me pretty darn close to where I was at. This might be a little too high. There we go. So Gaussian blur, keep everything pretty close. Let's actually take this back down to maybe like a 6. And then add the curves in there to bring our gray tones in versus the straight black tones. And again, you can adjust this to whatever you like. Small little adjustments will help over time. And there you go. Perfect. All right. There actually was one more layer, and this was a sharpen. Now, I just did a blur. Why am I going to sharpen this? I think it helps add to the effect of the grunge. So the fact that grunge was done in a time period where we still had film cameras and digital things weren't really evolved yet. They were just starting to come out. So the fact that we had analog equipment, things looked to be, we were watching things on CRT televisions. We were looking at things on CRT computer screens. We just didn't have the sharpness that we have today. So the fact that I blurred everything and then make it sharp again is also helping sell this effect. And you can see now I'm at 100% here, but this is the blur, and I'm putting an unsharp mask, amount of 100 and a radius of 5, and kicking some of this sharpness back in, and you're getting this little subtle, like things are sharp, but they're not really sharp effect. And I think that really works well when you're going for a grunge. You can take this one step further and add a sharpen 2. Let's reset this. And what I want to do is go to 100 again, set the radius to 0.5, and the radius is going to work tighter around each individual pixel. And then I'm going to set the threshold to 0.2. And if you look, what that's going to do is tighten up right around the C here. It's going to tighten up this. Turn it off. It's barely visible, but it's just going to tighten up these edges here a little bit and make things look a little bit sharper in a good way because it's imperfectly sharp. So that is the whole look. Now, what I did was I went back and said, okay, things aren't looking quite right. And how can I make this even more, grunge worthy? And one of the things that I looked at was this doesn't wave, the word doesn't wave as much as I would like it to. It's still kind of on a straight line here. So let's introduce that. And how I did that was went back to my typography layer, and let's set this to -10 and 30. And then let's duplicate and drag this up. Let's actually rename this to, and let's rename this displacement map. And what I want to do is go to fractal 01 and set this to 15 and 20 and see what that does. And there you go. So these two fractals are very important. So this works on the center of your typography, and it's going to mess with those letters almost like individually. This one, though, is going to mess with your overall look of things. And the fact that now I have a camera lens blur up here that is working on this layer, and now I have a displacement map working on this same fractal layer, it is going to manipulate my typography with a camera lens blur for the edges, and then also displacing it across the entire image. And I could pull this up and create more displacement. I could displace it higher vertically, whatever looks good to you, which that looks pretty cool right there. So this is where you get to experiment. Once you have this, you know, I'm calling it a rig, but once you have this rig set up, you can go then and animate things and do whatever you want. I almost forgot, before we jump into the next video, I want to show there is one little thing that I forgot to add here. And in this, you have the camera lens blur, right? If I turn this off, there's no track matte on this typography. See the camera lens blur here? It is affecting certain letters or certain areas of the letter. Well, when I put this Luma matte in, the background is clear all the way through. So the one thing you can do is take your camera lens blur and copy and paste that into your texture, and you will see now that the texture is blurred in the same areas. Now it's really, really strong. So I believe I pulled this down a little bit. Maybe let's try 15 and see what that does. And maybe even less than that, maybe even 5. But some scenes, depending on what you need, what you have, see here, see it's a little bit clear in the C over here, and it's clear here in this corner, but it gets blurry and it matches the blurriness of that fractal shape. So just something to keep an eye out. I wanted to point that out before we move in to the animation phase.